Oh, yes, I know it was. Fit your graffiti get to be, Bob?
I don't can yet.
Wanted.
What thing about the lockdown, Bob?
Not wanted.
Evening, Colin.
Hello.
Hi there.
Okay, will we just start?
Yes, 21 now, yeah, start.
All right, okay. Well, I'm going to start with a warm welcome, fellow Rotarians, and welcome to our Zoom meeting tonight, our weekly Zoom meeting. I hope everybody is well and keeping safe and sound, and the lockdown hopefully will be easing a bit to let more people out and about. We've got a guest tonight, and we have got Colin Wight with us. If I've pronounced the surname correctly, I do hope so.
Oh, you didn't?
Oh, there, at the top there.
White.
White.
White. Yes. Thank you, Andrew. We'll be hearing more from Colin later on. So I'm going to go straight into the happy, sad box. Does anybody get anything that they want to share with us, either happy or sad news?
Well, I suppose I can't escape this one. My grandson was born on Thursday, so that's me for one.
Anybody?
Folks?
And I'll put one in. I've just spent a wonderful 2 weeks in the company of my 2 grandchildren and had a wonderful, wonderful time.
Excellent. Super. Well, I'm going to put a pound in as well, because today Ryan and Chris helped me out to understand how our finances work in the Rotary Club. So thank you to both of them, and I'll put £2 in. So I will send that in the check, Ryan. All right.
Oh, that's very generous. Okay.
Okay.
Ryan, how much am I due you, Ryan?
£100.
I hoped you'd be counting. I'll have to go back over it. A few people have paid.
Mm-hmm.
And I need to go back over it.
It's all right, because I don't want to pay any more tonight till I know how much I've paid you.
Oh, no, come on. Just send me a tenner.
George.
I'll see you all when I get back into the British Legion.
Okay,
I'll
that's
make up for it,
George.
Ryan.
George down for 10, is it?
I never spoke
Why
to
not?
Ryan. I just asked how much I was due you.
Okay, well, you've spoken. I'll put you down for 1.
Oh, yeah.
George
I don't
is
swear
being
on you.
typical Scottish.
Aye, okay, Mr. English, aye, okay.
Okay, so
I'll put in £1 because that's the bike rides back up and running, and with a very enjoyable ride out to Fingham Farm shop today, coffee and cake, and got home almost dry. Not totally dry, but almost dry, but great fun.
Good.
but,
Oh, that's great.
yeah, well done on that one. Well done. All right, well, I'm going to move on to our speaker tonight, a guest of Reg. So I'll hand over to Reg and let Reg introduce his speaker and the topic for this evening.
Okay, thank you, President Elaine Sarah. Well, a personal welcome to my long-time neighbour, Colin Wight, married to Sarah with 2 grown-up daughters. His talk is entitled From Theresa to Trump. And it's about his career in journalism. He was always interested in journalism as a young lad in the Borders where he was born and bred. Age 65, his first job was with a local paper in Selkirk. And from there, he spent 30 years with the BBC, 19 of them in Aberdeen. And for the past 7 years, he's worked for STV, also in Aberdeen. Now, he's lived in Banchory since 1994, but pursues many interests in Braemar, where he volunteers at the castle and also produces occasional videos on the life in the village. So, club members, I have real pleasure in asking Colin to speak to us this evening. Over to you, Colin.
Right.
Good evening.
Yeah.
I'm sure normally I would have had a glass of wine by now, but we'll have to make do. I'll be hoping to share the screen at some point, so if there's any problems with that, just shout and let me know.
There isn't. I've co-hosted you, so you should be able to do it straight away.
All right, that's great. I have to say that I'm pretty intimidated by the background of Ralph, who seems to have got Niagara Falls behind him when the rest of us just have bookcases and boring wallpaper. What? Oh. Well done, Ralph. So I'll try to share the screen at the moment. There we go. Are you all seeing that?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
Great. Okay, so it's called From Theresa to Trump. Now, I work in the modern media, and Eddie Glanders will be well aware of the changes in the media over the years, and my goodness, hasn't it changed over a long period of time. But I'll just begin, because I don't know how many of you have ever been to a newsroom, but this is a brief look at the STV newsroom in Aberdeen. Kind of go through it. So that's STV in Aberdeen, a building some of you may know in Alton's, and that's a satellite truck, and that's pretty much what a newsroom looks like. Now, this was filmed a few years ago, and a lot of people in it have now joined the BBC, including Tyrone Smith there, and some of them still survive though. So these are the edit suites and the kind of equipment that we edit on. And we have discussions about what's going on into the program and so on. We've got a running order. You can see that's a referendum, so that was a few years ago. And we all edit on our own screens. But getting your hair ready is a very important part of television. That's Laura Goodwin. She's now with the BBC. You might see her presenting Reporting Scotland. And you read off the auto cue there. And that's the studio in Aberdeen. Now, when you're doing the program, there's only one person in there. And all the cameras are automated. Everything's pretty much automated. And that's the gallery where they produce the program from. It looks pretty complicated, and it is, so a lot of things can go wrong, but most of the time they go right. But timings are very important. Every day we get a timing for the program, and it's usually about 25 minutes and 14 seconds. It can't be 25 minutes and 13 seconds or 15 seconds. It has to be bang on. So everything has to be properly timed. But it wasn't always like this. So this is how the news used to be.
Television news organizer. It often begins with a ringing telephone and a glance at the map. The news story is underway. Sometimes the story is in London, perhaps an interview with a newly arrived statesman, a job for a sound film camera. Just one of the filming assignments repeated many times a day, 7 days a week, at home and abroad. The news story always has a background of urgency. From the moment the camera car returns to Alexandra Palace in North London with film for television news, time begins to enter into everything. Minutes matter in getting the news story on the screen. In a darkened viewing theatre, editors quickly pick out the most important scenes. The news film comes in ceaselessly. A year's intake joined together would stretch for 600 miles. Big news stories on film have been rushed on the air in 20 minutes after they arrive. This is the editor's task in the cutting room. The scriptwriter works against time as much as anyone in the news team. To help him fit his words to the picture, he has a detailed breakdown on paper of every scene in the film story. He has to get his facts right and present them clearly and quickly. His deadline is near at 10 p.m. In Studio B, the lights come on. The cameras move into place, rehearsals are over, the final order of the program is discussed with the technicians on the studio floor by the producer. the newsreader goes through his script for the last time. The job of putting television news on the air now comes closely into the hands of the production team in the control gallery above Studio B. The sound mixers, the vision mixers, the secretaries, the producer. Here in the studio where television began 21 years ago, up-to-the-minute news goes on the air several times a night. This is transmission.
By going ahead to the quiet side, please.
Here is the news. At the London docks, 104 ships are not being worked. That's too much. But it looks as though it's tight to work them up.
3, 2, 1, and through.
The news story is on the air.
Now, that was how news used to be produced. Do you mind if you recognise the newsreader there?
Richard Baker.
Richard Baker, yeah. You're slightly old enough to remember. So that's how the news used to be produced. And of course, in those days, you had to speak with a southeast of England accent, receive pronunciation. But the difference between that, which must have been in the 50s, I would imagine, and now is quite remarkable. Because in those days, you'd have needed a camera, you would needed film, you would needed editors, compared with today, where I can go out and entirely film my own report, bring it back to the flat here in Bankery, cut it on a very small laptop, and even send it to the studio or play it live from the laptop here. Or I can just use an iPhone and broadcast something. So it's very changed days from when I started. Now I started, this is Duns in Berwickshire, that's where I was born and brought up. I don't know if many of you have been there before, but...
a fine place and long for makers nearby.
That's right. Jim Clark, the famous racing driver, got the freedom of Duns many years ago. But I remember when I was growing up in Duns, apart from being a missionary at one point, I wanted to be Albert Schweitzer. I don't know if you remember him.
Yep.
But I always just wanted to be a journalist. And even at the age of 12 or 14, I would set up a little newsroom in the garden shed, and I would have 3 or 4 of my pals around, and I would send them out to report on a football match or just go and see what was happening locally. So I was just always really interested in journalism, and I was lucky in a way that my next door neighbour was the assistant editor of the Glasgow Herald at the time. So he took me up one day to Glasgow to see the Herald, and in those days it was old printing presses, and the smell and the excitement and the papers rolling were just incredible. It was just a marvellous thing to see. So that just really inspired me. So I went to Napier College in Edinburgh when I left school, ended up doing book publishing, but I was still keen on journalism. So that's me when I was a little lad. I'm a lot great since then. Still recognisable, I think.
Definitely the hair.
Oh
Yeah.
my goodness.
So that it's almost like a BBC newsreader though there. I've got my bow tie on.
Yes.
A script. So I went to the Berwickshire High School in Duns. But that was me when I was a student in Edinburgh.
Hey.
I think I bought a second-hand bed from Cumley Bank. I don't know if you know Edinburgh, but Cumley Bank Gardens,
Yep.
part of old Edinburgh. So we bought this bed and we wheeled it all the way up to Toll Cross where the flat was. But strangely in Toll Cross, in the cinema there, and the cameo it was, Woody Allen's Sleeper was showing at the time. So we parked the bed outside for a while Sleeper was on. So my first kind of taste of journalism was in Aberdeen University when I went there, and I wrote for Gaudi. I don't know if any of you went to Aberdeen University, did you? anyway, Gaudi was the university magazine. So I started doing some articles for Gaudi, just on reviewing pubs mainly and reviewing bands. But that was a really good experience. And when I went back to Edinburgh, I also worked for a What's-On magazine called City Links, which was run by a guy called Mel Young, who went on to run The Big Issue in Scotland. But that was a great experience. We didn't get paid any money, but it gave you a chance to contact some pretty well-known stars. So I rang the Odeon, Nasher Hall at one point when Billy Connolly was playing, and asked if I could interview Billy Connolly. So they said yes. Now, I just can't imagine that happening nowadays, but I spent an hour before the concert with Billy Connolly, with him going through his life story. And then he went on into concert. And that was just a great experience. But by writing for that magazine, it enabled me to show that I'd done some writing. And eventually got a job in the Borders with the Tweedale Press Group in Selkirk, which was very much rugby country. So, in fact, one of Scotland's best known rugby players, John Rutherford, the amazing John Rutherford, used to be working in the printing room in the paper. And Bill McLaren was always popping in and out. And the time I met McLaren was at a gala match when I didn't have time to get a meal, so I got some fish and chips. So I was sitting just behind him. And McLaren sat down in his seat and said, "You couldn't have sat about doing wind, son, could you?" The smell was obviously affecting his commentary. But I was lucky when I was in the Borders, because in Selkirk, the BBC started a local station at the time I was there called Radio Tweed. And without that starting, I would never have got a job in the BBC. I mean, you could apply to the BBC. If I'd written off to the BBC, the application would have gone to somewhere in London and been filed forevermore. But because the BBC was just across the road, I was lucky enough to get a job there. So that was the group of people that I worked with, and that was a fantastic experience. It was one of the first community stations. That meant that it was on for half an hour in the morning, half an hour at night. There was only 2 full-time paid staff, and the rest were volunteers from the local community. But it was a great training ground. In fact, BBC Scotland's rugby commentator for many years, Bill Johnston, who was a nephew of Bill McLaren, he started commentating with us at the age of 40. And he was so good that the BBC Scotland took him on, and he had a long career in broadcasting. Another guy was a shelf filler called Mark White. He was just filling shelves in Tesco. Well, he's now Sky News' Home Affairs correspondent. So it was a great way to get into broadcasting. And David Steele was the local MSP at the time, and that made life very interesting. But from there, eventually went to Glasgow. And it was there that I met the subject of the first name in the talk, Mother Theresa. So I can't remember what year it was, and I've not been able to find it on Google, but it must have been the 1980s, when she was in her 70s. And she was visiting, I think, St Mary's Cathedral in Edinburgh. And we weren't allowed to do interviews, but she came out of the church, so I just thought I would chance my luck. Now, I'm 6'3". Mother Theresa in high heels was 5 feet. And she was stooped over. So you can imagine the kind of sight it was as I was allowed to ask her one question. But that was quite a thrill to meet somebody as famous as Mother Theresa pretty early in my career. So I worked with the BBC in Glasgow from 1990 to 94. And then from 94, I came up to Aberdeen to work in the newsroom. And I worked in Aberdeen with the BBC until I was forced to leave there under voluntary redundancy in 2013. And that's when I joined the BBC. That was my last day, in fact, in the BBC in Aberdeen. I thought for my last bulletin, and at the end of March, I would put on a bow tie and a formal suit. A few months later, I then joined STV. But over the years, I've done many serious stories, a lot of court reporting, council reporting, murders, all the rest of it. And it was a great chance to travel and travel abroad. I went to Washington to see the Lockerbie Memorial being unveiled by President Clinton. I spent a couple of weeks in Malawi, looking at how the country had changed and Scotland's connections with Malawi. I went to Namibia, where I followed a Peterhead fishing boat that was fishing in Namibia. Reported from Italy on a court case from Aberdeen that was being dealt with there. And with STV, I've been to Norway to look at Brexit and so on. But of all the serious stories, it's the kind of funny ones that people remember you by. So this was a story about rats that I did. A woman who kept rats in Turry, and they're very nice little rats. But this is the story.
Rats, not everyone's idea of the perfect pet, but Dumbo rats, as they're called, and no, they don't have a trunk, are becoming increasingly popular. Colin Wight's been to meet one of the youngest breeders in the country.
Now at this moment, some of you might be cringing. This is just one of some 24 Dumbo rats in a flat in Aberdeen. The rats belong to 15-year-old Jasmine Musgrove.
They're really good pets. They're better than normal rats, and they're better than hamsters. They're really playful. She likes to escape a lot and hide. And this one likes to lick your face and eyelashes and just cuddle up. They're so rare that they're just gorgeous.
The Dumbos may be cute, but they were originally bred in Northwest America for use in scientific testing in labs. They live on average around 4 years. Well, it may look like a bush tucker trial and I'm a celebrity, get me out of here, but these animals are undoubtedly cute. However, they are very rare, and if you want to find one in your Christmas stocking, it will cost you around £20 at least in your local pet shop. That's a lot of cash for a hairless rat. Colin Wight, reporting Scotland.
Colin Wight's bush tucker trial there. Now the weather forecast, here's Peter.
So you always have to do a lot of different things in journalism, and over the years, as well as rats, I've had to deal with a Gaelic-speaking sheepdog that wouldn't really perform for the camera. I've been up in helicopters, hovering over Brent Spar. I've been in an American nuclear submarine. I've been on an American aircraft carrier. I've been on fishing boats in force 8 gales, which is never a very pleasant experience at the best of times. It's just a great window and a chance to be able to experience a lot of different things. But back to the animals, one of the weirdest stories I did was about a spider that got stolen in Powys in Aberdeen. And the spider was called Colin. So I was obviously chosen to do the story. And the cameraman that went along with me was called Colin as well. So we ended up in the door at Powys. We eventually found the flat. And this is the story of Colin the spider. From the 5th of June, 2003. You might remember the clocks from the old days.
Tarantulas aren't the cuddliest of pets, but they are becoming more popular. This is Colin, the female spider. She's a bit hairier than me, but just as cuddly. Colin's had an adventurous 24 hours. She went missing yesterday after a break-in at this house in Aberdeen. Today, the suspicious pet shop owner called the police after someone tried to sell Colin.
I just think it's sick that people steal someone's pet. Before you used to have to worry about your video and your TV, now you've got to worry about your pets. So I know it's totally wrong.
Colin's plight attracted a lot of attention, mainly from other Colins. It's the name of our BBC cameraman covering the story. Then there was the photographer from the local paper. Among those two and me, who could manage a total of just 6 legs. Colin's owner, Nicola, was happier to see her 8-legged pet safely back home.
I'm completely shocked. I can't believe that she's back here. I didn't think I'd see her again. And I'm going to lock her up from now on. She's not going to go missing again.
Colin got her name because when Nicola bought her, she thought Colin was a he.
Colin, now enjoying the comforts and cuddles of home. Let's just hope she stays there. Colin Wight reporting Scotland, Aberdeen.
Well, that's Colin the Spider, and we saw some rats. So just sticking on a slightly creepy theme, one of the biggest stories I covered was one Donald Trump. And, seamless transition there. But Trump, as you all know, came to Aberdeen around about 2006 to set up the greatest golf course in the world at Balmedy. And that was a big, big story because he promised thousands of jobs and a lot of money in the local economy. It was a very controversial story. I kind of got to know Trump reasonably well. So at one point, I ended up traveling to America to see his golf courses there and did an interview with him in Trump Tower. And I got on pretty well with Trump until one day that I arrived in Aberdeen and I did a story on him that for some reason he didn't like. And I'll explain what happened after I've shown you the reports.
Donald Trump touched down in Aberdeen this morning on board his new private jet. He was keen to see for himself the work on his Scottish golf course.
Wow, that is really, there's nothing like it.
He came, he saw, he was delighted.
Well, it's very exciting. We've worked on this a long time and it's absolutely exciting.
But not everyone is happy with what's happening on the Many estate. A protest march took place only 2 weeks ago. And this local resident is involved in a wrangle over his fence and shed. The Trump organisation has threatened legal action.
Well, they've always struck me as being most politely describable as ungentlemanly and unbusinesslike. It's like dealing with a bunch of third-party kids. My dad's bigger than your dad. It has very little effect. These guys are not set up to do business, and we're better off going home.
For Donald Trump, today is about seeing his vision turned into reality. For others, it's a desecration of a sensitive stretch of Scottish coastline. But after all the protests, all the rows, there's little doubt this course is now going ahead.
You like it?
No comments. But like it or not, Donald Trump says all the controversy has been good news.
It's been amazing in a sense, because the thing that people don't know is how popular this whole endeavor has been. The people in Aberdeen, the people in Scotland love it. But because of a small controversy with literally a couple of people, it's been worldwide news, and that's been very good for the course.
Donald Trump will spend his time here finalising details with staff. Work is ahead of schedule, and the course is expected to open on the 1st of July next year.
Some will say he putted and he missed the putt, right? Right, Martin? They'll say he missed the putt. But we all know better, right?
Well, that was in around about 2010, and Trump hasn't changed much since then. Following that report, he phoned our news editor and complained bitterly about me saying no comment when he asked if I liked the course. Well, at the time I was BBC and I couldn't make any comment because we're impartial. But he spent half an hour on the phone berating my news editor and said that I needed to be brought under control and I should be fired. He threatened to stop the BBC from ever covering the golf course again. And he's never really spoken to me since. And that was over one very small comment. But you could hear him at the end there saying how he thought the media would report how he was putting. Well, he still continues that to this day, saying fake news will simply report things the wrong way. So Trump hasn't changed one bit since he was in Aberdeen. And he always called the dunes at Many the biggest dunes in the world. And they're not even the biggest dunes in Great Britain. And we pointed this out to him, but that never changed his mind. And if you go to that course today, you'll still see the plaque saying these are the biggest dunes in the world. He seems to exist in a world where if he says something is right, then it must be right. And no matter what anybody else says, it won't change. So I keep pretty close tabs on Mr. Trump and what he's doing. The last time I saw him was a couple of years ago, well, just in 2016, just before he was elected, and he came to Aberdeen, and as part of his campaign to keep golf course. But over a lengthy period in journalism, getting on for 42 years now, like him or loathe him, there are a few more colourful and bigger characters than Donald Trump. However, having said that, celebrities are great and it's nice to meet them, but over a long period of time, some of the most touching and memorable interviews you do are just with ordinary people. People who've, especially people who've suffered bereavement, and press often get attacked for knocking on doors of people who are bereaved. But sometimes we're welcome, sometimes not, and sometimes people welcome you in because they want to honour and pay tribute to the people they've lost. I mean, I covered the Sapphire tragedy in 1997 when there was 4 fishermen killed on the Sapphire and Peterhead. And to this day, I'm still pretty good friends with most of the families that I covered there. And one of the most dramatic interviews was with Pasquale Righi. I don't know if you remember, but in 2010, Theresa Righi, who lived just along the roads near Dramoke, she stabbed her 3 children to death in Edinburgh. And Pasquale Righi, her husband, eventually did a pool interview on how that had affected him. And that was pretty tough. So it's journalism's hard, and it's getting harder because everybody now can take footage on their cameras, and to some extent everybody's a journalist. Anybody can go onto Twitter and Facebook, they've got access to you. And people like Donald Trump have really kind of undermined journalism by calling it fake news. Well, journalists do make mistakes, but in all my years with the BBC, I can never remember one editorial meeting when we decided, hey, we're going to really do a bad report to make the SNP or the Tories or Labour look bad. Every meeting I've ever been in, we're at pains to try to present a truthful and accurate report. And of course we make mistakes because we're up against a very tight deadline on a day-by-day basis, especially now. But most of the misinterpretations are to do with cock-up rather than conspiracy. Anyway, I'll be retiring soon, hopefully in March next year, and I'll be going on to, I'll still be filming in Braemar, but this is the kind of thing that I'm doing in Braemar, where I spend most of my summer dressed as the Earl of Mar, who built the castle in 1628 and who started the 1715 rebellion. So if you ever fancy a taste of the Jacobites, then come up the road and see me in Braemar in my new role away from journalism. Thanks very much, and if you have any questions, just shout.
Quite. Slide the out and off, isn't it? Maybe just that one.
There we go.
Yeah, there we are, right. Oh, slide it out. You come up with a screen, you have phone answer. I've come out of it just now.
Yeah.
Yeah, Colin, are there big differences operating between the BBC and the STV newsrooms?
Yeah, quite a lot. Mainly because BBC's got so much more money and so much more staff, really. I think it must be easier going from STV to the BBC. Yeah. Because I find when I went from the BBC to STV, that the resources were far fewer. I mean, the BBC have got, you know, a long history of making programs. You've got access to nature programs. sports programs, history programs. They've got rights to so many different things. So STV simply don't have that. They're a really good company to work for, but trying to get pictures to illustrate stories, even still pictures, is very difficult. The BBC, for example, have a deal with the Imperial War Museum, with Pathy, where they're allowed a certain amount of minutes every year. Anytime we want that kind of footage, we have to negotiate. And we very rarely pay any more than, say, £200 for footage. We simply can't afford it. And they've got offices worldwide, so STV and ITV don't really. So the BBC, you've got access to reporters in Africa, Australia, New Zealand, America, New York, whereas you just don't have that with STV. So you just have to be more inventive and appeal to people to, you know, give you pictures for lesser payment and things like that. So that was the main difference, just the huge level of resources that are available to you. But the main thing is you still have to be exceptionally good looking to get a job with either organisation.
Yeah, well, having looked at Angela Breimer's hair tonight, I can see she's still surviving well, and we'll be looking forward to getting to the hairdressers.
Well, I've not had a haircut since March 15th, so.
Yeah.
Well, not done by anybody else anyway.
Yeah, I'm a wee bit longer.
Yeah, I've actually been on furlough and still am. So I was on furlough for 3 weeks in March, and then I worked in April, and then I worked all of May. But I've been off all of June, and I go back again on August the 4th. And that's the longest time I've ever been off work in over 45 years.
Mm.
But Bantry is a nice place to be on furlough in.
Yes, yes. When you're reporting for the news, is it always with a cameraman, or do you carry your own camera?
Well, I've always got my own camera with me. I mean, in the back of my car on a daily basis, I've got a tripod. I've got 2 other tripods that carry lights. I've got a tripod for a microphone, especially at the moment because we have to social distance. I've got a heavy laptop which we edit on, and I've got a camera case for the whole lot of equipment. But it depends on the story. Well, a lot of the time you'll get a camera, but STV now only have 2 cameras because a couple of years ago they made a lot of redundancies, about 60 redundancies. So a lot of cameramen were paid off, and they gave all the reporters camera. So a lot of reporters almost all the reporters have got their own cameras now. I was quite lucky because I did camera training at the BBC in 2000. So I've been doing it for 20 years. And it's called video journalism. So when I started, you always had a cameraman, a sound man, often a producer, and even a production secretary and yourself. So often there'd be 3 or 4 people going out to film. Now, most of the time, it's just me or me and the camera. Because there was a guy called Michael Rosenblum, who was a stand-up comic in America. He was Jewish, and he found that the whole system of television news was really very elitist, that you would require huge resources to go along and just interview one person. And they thought that wasn't very friendly to, you know, I don't know if any of you have been on television, but it's a bit daunting when a whole crew turns up and asks you to be, you know, forget the camera and just be natural. It's kind of hard to do that. So Rosenblum had the idea of just taking one camera and spending some time with people. So as a Jew, he took the brave decision to go to Palestine and spend a month in Palestinian camps and report their story, which he just felt wasn't being reported properly. So ever since then, that started this kind of revolution called video journalism. So most journalists now film all their own stuff and edit all of their own material as well, which is great because it gives you a lot of control over the product. But some people like it, some people really take to it, and others don't. So it just depends. But there's something very satisfying about coming up with an idea, just going out on your own, filming it, coming back, editing it, and being in charge of the finished product. But of course, everybody can film nowadays. We've all got smartphones, and you know, we can all, and the smartphones are really very good footage. So we're all filmmakers to some extent now.
Is our president? Is our president around?
He's on mute. Someone's muted us. He needs to be unmuted by Jim.
Jim, can you organise that? Please?
I'm getting there.
Right.
There we go.
Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Excellent. Colin, thank you very much for that. I'm afraid I was on mute, so I couldn't ask any or respond to any of the questions. I know John wanted to ask a question. Are you still wishing to ask the question, John? John Keegan?
He's on mute as well.
We're all on mute.
No, just you.
Thank you, Andrew. Edwina, do you want to?
No, it's okay. I'm off it now. Thank you.
All right.
I wondered if Colin ever worked with the cameraman Fred Morrison.
No, see, he died the other day. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. No, he was. I think I must have been at the BBC at the time. Did you know him?
Yeah. Well, Fred was a great friend of mine, but three of his things he laughed about was he played the pipes when Alan Wells won the gold medal in Moscow. Semi-pissed, but and he was Bernie the Bolt.
Alan Wells won the gold semi-pissed.
He was Bernie the Bolt for the golden shot. And he played football for Third Lanark.
Oh my goodness, that's incredible.
Colin.
Yeah.
Colin.
I went down to Guildford many years ago to interview Alan Wells. And I raced him very briefly over 10 yards just to say I could. Yeah, actually, one of my another guy I raced was a guy called PC Brown. I don't know if you remember PC Brown, the Scotland fullback, do you?
No.
Peter Brown, he was a famous Scotland rugby fullback in the Borders. And in my first time on the Southern Reporter in Selkirk, I was told to go to Melrose to interview PC Brown at the Greenyards. And I turned up and I couldn't see this guy. I mean, there was nobody I could see at all. It looked like a policeman. Spent ages looking for him, and he eventually turned up and said, "I'm PC Brown." Of course, that was what he was known as. He was Peter Charles Brown, and everybody knew him as PC. So that was a lesson.
Did you work with Mike McClintock?
Yeah, he used to be with the police, didn't he?
Mm.
Yeah, Mike was with the police, and I think Aberdeenshire Council as well. Mike was a great guy, very helpful.
Okay.
John, John, do you want to ask a question?
Colin, I'd just like to ask you, you've served, you're now at the age of 65. You've had a great life with what you've done. Would you do it over again, Colin?
Yeah, I can't imagine doing anything else. There's only two other jobs that I've ever wanted to do. That was be a professional footballer or a roadie with a band called The Killers. Those are the only two jobs I've ever wanted to do.
So you made a success of this one, so that's why you want to do it again.
Yeah, I think, well, I really don't think I'm going to be a professional footballer now, do you?
I wouldn't think so, Colin, no. Sorry.
The only other job I would fancy would be maybe being public relations for His Majesty's Theatre. I think that'd be an interesting job.
Yeah.
Mm. But no, I mean, I was dead lucky to get a job with the BBC. Dead lucky. In fact, I got the job with the BBC. Well, I didn't get an interview to start with, but then they re-advertised it. So I got the interview, but the interview turned out to be the day after my first daughter was born 7 weeks premature at Eastern General Hospital. So I had the interview. I'd been up all night till 3 in the morning. And of course, I'd forgotten to get my suit trousers, so I had to get my dad to open up the laundry in Selkirk to get my suit trousers. So I turned up at the interview in Edinburgh at 10 o'clock in the morning, 7 hours after my daughter was born, and was sitting there, and down the stairs came Fulton Mackay. You remember Fulton Mackay?
Yes.
It was the prison guard in Porridge. So that was my introduction to the BBC, but I just felt completely zonked. I mean, they asked me what ENG stood for, which was Electronic News Gathering. All I could think of was Eastern General Hospital, because it's probably between blankets and towels with EGH on it. But amazingly, I got the jobs. So working with the BBC was just fantastic. And yeah, I would just do it all over again.
Another question, Colin. How would Eddie Glanders, would he have suited the BBC or the STV?
Well, it doesn't really pass the good looks test, so he wouldn't have got a job.
No, I'm asking a question.
Eddie was always a very good performer when we interviewed him, weren't you, Eddie?
He was.
I don't think you can hear me, can you? I think I'm muted.
No, you're okay.
You're okay.
Can you hear me?
Speak louder.
Yeah, just to remind George that I did present the farming programme in Grampian Television for a year.
Yeah.
Okay, Eddie, that's fine.
Colin, there was a great shot of you early on in your speech, lying on a bed in the street.
Yeah.
The bed that you bought at Cumley Bank. It looked like a very narrow bed. But
yeah, it was such a single bed.
yeah, there aren't many of us that can show a shot of ourselves lying in bed in the street, I don't suppose. But you bought it at Cumley Bank, I heard you say.
Yeah.
And of course, I don't know whether you're aware, but when Paul Harris founded Rotary in 1905, he later married a lady that came from there. And the house they lived in America was named Cumley Bank.
Goodness me.
So you've very appropriate to bring that up at a Rotary meeting.
Yeah. Reg knew that, of course.
But Colin, seeing you in your bed, I thought it was another lockdown with the head of curls you had. And with your mouth.
Yeah. Oh, I've still at least got a head of hair.
Oh, you have, aye. Okay, fine. We won't go down that road.
Colin, could I ask you, is there anything that you would do different if you were doing it again?
I would have loved to have learned shorthand properly. Shorthand, you need shorthand for court reporting, and no matter how hard I tried, I could never. I managed to pass the test. You had to get 120 words a minute at one point, and I just managed it. But I think, luckily for me, I've found that most judges speak at around about 45 words a minute. I'm always very envious of people who've got really good shorthand that they can then read back. You find most journalists, they come out of a court and they all compare each other's notes. And as long as they've got the same, they've agreed, it's fine if you're all agreed on the same mistake. At least you're all wrong. But yeah, I mean, no, I was dead lucky to get a job with the BBC. The BBC were fantastic with me. I was so lucky to get a job with STV. And I never had any great ambitions to go into management or anything. The brief time I was in management, I just didn't really like it very much. I mean, people find it odd, but I far prefer being out in the cold and the rain and mucky fields and meeting people to being in meetings. It just drives me nuts. So yeah, the short hand's the only thing.
No.
Excellent.
I don't want to.
Questions for Colin? Nope. Can I call on Reg to give the vote of thanks then, please?
Yes, thank you, President. In fact, on this evening's evidence, I'm surprised he didn't try stand-up as a comedian.
Wouldn't have seen him.
But anyway, and may I just say that Alan Wells was a former pupil of my old Edinburgh school,
Oh, really?
but younger, much younger than I.
Oh, aye.
Yeah. Journalists, I always thought the two words that come into my mind is villains or friends, and I think it's the latter. It's the latter that you come into for sure, and you've always been a very good neighbour and a very helpful neighbour as well. And you've drunk my whiskey at New Year for many a long year.
As well.
But anyway, a very entertaining and predictably amusing talk. So I'd like all the members to put your hands together and thank Colin very much for speaking to us this evening.
Thank you, Reg, for that.
So much indeed. If any of you ever want to come to the STV studios, they used to say, just give me a shout. But I think at the moment, that's pretty impossible until all of the social distancing is over. So. But certainly, if any of you ever see me in the street or want to ask me anything, just shout.
Will do. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
With a thought.
Okay. Right, I'll move on to President's announcements, and you'll be glad to know there's not too many. The first one I want to bring up is the email that's been brought out from Harry with the consent for photographs. So if you could just get that back to Harry, that would be much appreciated. That's all I've got to say, thank goodness. Has anyone did any visits to any other Zoom meetings for any other clubs this week? No.
No.
Yeah, I went to the district one, just listening to them deciding where they were going to have their next meeting. And I learned one or two things about Zoom. Nothing to report about the actual decision on where. It's still up in the air.
Okay. That takes me on to Secretary's announcements. Do you have any announcements, Jim, to make?
Yeah, following the format we had before, the next week's speaker is John Kagan, and he's talking on a passage to India. Birthdays got Richard Ridger, 17th of July, and Jim Dempsey on the 21st of July. Correspondence. Ryan, what's happening with the India Prince Charles situation?
It's nothing at the moment. I'm still waiting to hear back.
Okay.
So it's still waiting. Sorry.
Okay. I've had a letter from a student, Sarah Clark. She lives in Bankery, 14 years. She's a guider, and she's trying to raise $2,500 to go to Canada. So I'm going to that discussion in council at the next meeting. Right, RIBI and Carers UK are having a talk, a Zoom talk, Wednesday, 22nd of July at 2:30, sorry. So did everybody get that email, or is it just come to the secretaries?
I've not got it.
No.
I've not got it.
No, just no.
Okay, well, the details are on the website. If anybody's interested, you'll get the details and logging in, and you can reserve your place. That's from Jennifer Somerville, District Webmaster. there's a new magazine, 2020 Rotary District 11010, which they're advertising now. So you can see that on your website. There's a talk by Captain Tom, Tuesday the 29th of July, 7 p.m, which you can register for. You know, the chap that walked in his garden, 100, yeah, whatever he did. That's it. That's all for me. That's all from me.
Thank you, Jim.
Elaine, Sarah? Okay, Dina?
Someone.
Yeah, my iPad slipped, sorry.
Ryan, did you want to speak?
Yes, please. Just to say, first of all, Mr. Secretary, my apologies for the next 2 meetings. I'm going away to see my new grandson and his parents, of course. And thank you all for those who paid their subs so far. And I appeal to those of you whose subs are outstanding, please get on with it. If anybody wants to pay by check over the next 2 weeks, could they please send their checks to Chris Fry, as he has the paying in book and he can deal with those. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Welfare, Reg, any update on anybody?
No report to make.
Okay. I sent a get well card to John McGee from all of us, and I'm going to go and visit him over the next day or so and catch up with him and see how he's getting on. I know that Secretary Jim and his wife Jeanette have not been very well over this week, so I'm hoping that both of you are feeling a lot better very soon.
I dislocated some.
Oh my word.
Well,
what have you done?
Yeah.
Oh. I should have said, Elaine, Sarah, I spoke to John a day or two ago and he sounded quite chirpy. So your visit will be a pleasant one, I think. I also spoke to Colin Sutherland yesterday. He's missing everybody. I told him everybody else was missing him as well. You know about Colin, I think, but he was a little bit mystified as to why people weren't coming to pick him up to go to Rotary on Wednesday, and had to explain that to him. But he's okay. He was his usual jovial self. And I spoke to Jim Dempsey also during the week, and of course he doesn't come on Zoom, but he's fine too.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you. Any conveners wishing to speak?
No, thanks.
All right.
Jeff?
Okay. Can I just say that 2 days ago, I was down in the square looking at what used to be the Rotary bench, and it was in pieces.
Oh.
And I went back and looked at it today, and it is magnificent. Neil has done a tremendous job in that, so it's all ready to be used.
Ooh.
Excellent.
But can I just say, Elaine, Sarah?
Yeah.
It'd be really good to be used, but I don't think it's ever been used where it's actually situated. I think it's time now to look for an appropriate place in Bankery to look at where it should be used for for Bankery Rotary Club, because you never see nobody sitting at it, and it's decayed over the last X amount of years, 10 years. And I think it's been refurbished. I feel it is now time to move it to somewhere it's going to be used. I don't know where, but I've an indication, but I've got nothing to do with that. But it's time to move it from where it is to somewhere more into the village, so it's going to be used.
Okay. Perhaps it might be good if everybody just dropped me an email as to where they think it might want to go. You might want to put the chair, and then we can take that to council if you want to do.
Well, the only place I'm thinking on, you know, when you go into Belfield Home, there's some benches there, and people sit and have their ice cream, their coffees and whatever there, and they use the benches there. And I feel it, because it was given to us as a gift from Castlemaine or Twinning Club, and I feel it must be used, because if it's not going to be used, why do we bother upgrading it every year and looking after it? Because if it's not being used, we should just forget about it. Put it somewhere in the village, the town of Banchory, where it's going to be used. That's my indication.
Good points, George. Very good points. How does everybody else feel about it?
Well, I was just talking to Richard and Neil about it today on our bike ride, and they too feel that it could be better positioned. The suggestion that they came up with was the Rose Garden, which is by the Belfield. So I don't know if that is a suitable location or who we approach to get permission to move it there. I don't know if it's council land or belongs to the Belfield or whom. So it's something to investigate. It's not going to happen tomorrow, but yes, I think it is something that needs to be taken on board to raise the profile of the facility that we're providing to the village, the town.
I know when Bob took it from me, he got permission to put it into the actual, where the drafts was beside the town's hall. It was an ideal place. So it was positioned there, but now we're looking at it, no disrespect to Bob or anyone else, but I just feel that it's not being recognized in there. And now there's going to be a funeral parlor beside it. I think it's time we moved it.
Good link, George.
Sorry.
I think it's quite true. Saying, George, it's good to have it moved, and I quite like where, in my opinion, I quite like where you're suggesting where the ice cream, where they all sit and have their ice cream.
Yes, well,
that would, you know, it's close to the Belfield, and it's also people travelling or tourists coming in and out with no culture as part of the village as well. But again, if there anybody else wants to come in with anything, Ralph, can you find out who we have to ask to get it moved? Can I put that on your shoulders?
Yeah. Yeah, I'll make inquiries about people who maybe ought to know that information, Bob.
Yeah, it's all that bit doing about Belfield and the Rose Garden is private land, so you can't stick it on there. The Rose Garden belongs to the surgery. The wee bit through, I'm not sure whether it's the Belfield or the council that owns it, but it's finding somewhere suitable to put it. That actually belongs to the council.
But what about the actual, Bob, can I just, looking at the park, you know, the play park, I mean, there's picnics and whatever down there, would that be a suitable area? Would it, I don't know, I mean.
No, I mean, it'd be getting the road for the grass cutting forever we put it, so it's got to be some way for it's not going to annoy people. And that's why it was put where it's put. And it does get used. I mean, you've maybe never seen somebody sitting at it, but I have seen people using it. So the bench part it is does get used, and it's a pretty high profile there because everybody turns their cars at the square. So every car that goes through the square sees the Rotary logo there.
Okay.
But I take your point about it's maybe not high profile, but to get it some way far, it's going to be seen. The other place would be Scotskinner Square, but that's a desert as well, so it's far to put. I mean, you're right, the Belfield is a place, but we tried to put it there before. It was spoken about getting moved a few years ago, but we come up against a brick wall when we tried to put it in the Belfield.
Is that the Belfield home?
No, the bit for you're speaking about where the tables are.
Yeah.
It's all the community stuff that is in there. You probably best speak to BDI and G. Henretti and some of them and get our Beatrice and get it in there.
Ralph, there you go. That's a boy for you.
But one thing we do have to carefully avoid is putting it somewhere where idiots will have portable barbecues on the thing. You see so many of these benches that are spoilt by being scorched. So someplace fairly high profile where that isn't going to happen is an important consideration.
But what about the high street? You know, you've got benches in the high street.
Oh, come on.
Don't go there, George. Do not go near the high street.
No, it's okay. I just something that's got through my mind. No.
Okay.
I don't live in Bankery. I live in Fens, and I just feel that I always think it should be in a more. Yeah, Bob, I appreciate what you're saying, but I think it's got to be, because it's been a money cost to do this up. It's got to be looked after again, and I think it's got to be moved, Bob. I mean, that's me. Okay. That's me.
Yes.
So, well, can we all have a wee think about that then and come back? Is that okay to say that?
Yes.
Yeah. Leave it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Any other conveners wishing to speak? Jeff. Jeff's on mute. Can we unmute Jeff? Are you there, Jeff?
Oh. He's sleeping.
Are you muted or unmuted?
He's muted.
Right, pressing you.
Yeah, we got him now.
Thank you very much, Jim. I seem to be the only one you locked out. There must be a purpose for that. I don't know.
No, there's Alan Lilly's locked out as well for some reason.
I just want to say two things. Jim Dempsey asked me to ask who was in charge of getting the crocuses this year, if anyone. Now, it used to be a foundation thing to get order crocuses if I want. I think he wants a couple of thousand. I'm not sure, but if somebody could look at that. I don't even know where foundation is now. Is it in with international, or as it doesn't have a committee of its own, seemingly?
No, foundation does have a committee. It was Linda and Christina who are the.
And not in the book, then, is it?
Yes, it's in the book. Yeah.
Okay, my apology. I must have misread it. Can maybe find out, because I think there'll be a time limit of when these get ordered. That's Jim was asking, so I'm just his mouthpiece for that. Second thing is our charity golf competition, which is held in August annually, obviously is not going to go ahead as normal, because we can't ask companies and businesses to cough up 250 quid a time when they're making people redundant and not been trading. So instead of that, we're having a members and guests golf day. So this is just a prior warning. I will be looking for raffle prizes and a heads up for Edwina, Andrew, the other golfers. We'll have a Reg if you want. Raymond's already playing. Harry. An email will be going out from the club professional on Friday to the members to say they can book tea times for that day through me. If you want a preferential choice, pick the time that you would like, get in touch with me tomorrow by email, and you'll sneak in before the members. I'll give you more details about it another night, because we're late tonight anyway. Okay, thanks, Lindsay.
Thanks, Jeff. Jeff, can I just quickly ask if you could give our members a slight update on the Legion and what's happening with them?
Well, it's only open today, and I was playing golf today. I have no idea what's happening with them, but I spoke to Craig on Tuesday, and once they settle down, they will know what they can cope with and how they're managing. And I will get back to you immediately, I know.
Thank you very much for that. Is that anybody else wishing to speak, or is that everybody? Yep. Okay. Right. That brings me to thank our guest, Colin Wight. Thank you very much for an interesting and funny topic. It was really enjoyable tonight. I'd like to thank you for joining us. And I'd like to just end the night. And I'll just end the night with the usual Rotary toast. If you can raise any glass you have at the side of you. Rotary the world over.
Rotary and peace the world over.
Peace the world over.
Everyone, see you next week.